Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another college football playoff preview here on the Sports Daily Media Network YouTube channel. I'm your host, Sean Vowells. Joe Meade is with me. And Joe, we're at the end of the line, the national championship game from Atlanta, Georgia. We've got the Ohio State Buckeyes and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Obviously, long paths to get here from both teams, including a pretty disappointing loss in the regular season as heavy favorites at home. And then you can check out our other videos from how they've got here in the college football playoff. But Joe, before we get into some specifics, what are you looking for in this one?
Before we even get into specifics, man, I can't pronounce anything today. I really want to give our host and the guy who runs this whole thing a shout out. If you go on Sports Daily CFP TikTok, I'm not encouraging everyone to follow. I would tell everyone to look at the pin video that was posted December 20th of 2024. As of now, our host has every prediction correct, including the two teams in the title game, the Ohio State Buckeyes and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. So for a lot of people who question, we certainly get a lot of things wrong here. We get a lot of things right, but if we get something this egregious correctly, we're going to be sure to pat ourselves on the back. Sean's too humble to do it, but I'm not. So,
well, I haven't been humble in the comments to the people that were dissing my prediction. If you said something along the lines of this is wrong, you got to reply. And I'm pretty close in our Sports Daily playoff pool on ESPN. It's basically me versus one other. If Ohio State or Notre Dame wins, I've got the Irish. Now, Joe, it's certainly they're certainly not the favorites here, and it would be something. This was the only one that I did. It's not as if I did 25 on ESPN. This is the only one I did, and I'm glad that it's good so far. I don't have the utmost confidence in the Irish to get the job done here, though. Buckeyes open. It's 10-point favorites. It has gone down to 8.5. But, Joe, with the game being in Georgia, not really a geographical advantage. Maybe Notre Dame coming from Miami, but I'm sure they went back for a couple days and then go back down. Let's go to Ohio State's offense first. Texas, for the most part, did a decent job in holding them down. You've got Egbuka, Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate at wide receiver. Notre Dame's secondary has been very good, but I'm not sure they've faced the amount of weapons that Ohio State has. So, Joe, obviously, if Ohio State's offense is clicking early, it's probably going to be a blowout. But if it's not, is the only way that Notre Dame wins is if they're not clicking to start?
I don't necessarily agree with that, Sean. I think Texas kind of gave a blueprint, as Michigan has, to shut down this, like, let's call it what it is. It's a steamroller in Ohio State's passing attack, right? Notre Dame all year has won games because of their defense. And the one game they lost was not because of their defense. I'm just going to call that out right now. So, in terms of best on best, this is probably as good as it gets for a title game. Notre Dame's defense coordinated masterfully by Al Golden versus Chip Kelly. Two former head coaches, kind of, in a way, were disgraced as head coaches, but certainly as coordinators, defensive play callers, strategist, this is as good a matchup as it gets. I do think Notre Dame's secondary will be the best secondary Ohio State's faced all year. Does that mean Jeremiah Smith's going to, again, be completely ineffective? I don't think so. But I do think they could take away guys like a Carnell Tate, Emeka Egbuka, who did a really, in a way, methodical job of tearing apart Texas. You know, you look at the final score, Ohio State's offense only scored 21 points. But they picked their spots. This is going to be a big pick their spots game for Ohio State. Do they have the ability to be both aggressive and patient when it calls for it? I think that's what it could come down to in the coaching battle. Because personnel battle, I think this is pretty even, you know. Between the explosive players of Henderson, Jeremiah Smith, even a Carnell Tate, I think Notre Dame has the perfect way to match that with their secondary and their elite defensive line play. And I think coaching, kind of like the Texas game in a game of inches, is going to play a big factor in this particular matchup.
Notre Dame's defense is very injured. It has been for a majority of the second half of this year. But Joe, they're still performing at a really high level. I do still think that this is the best unit that Ohio State has faced. I don't think it's all that different from Texas, and I think they're going to give the Irish a chance. I don't think this is going to be 28-0 at the end of the first quarter, but I think the key to this game is going to be when it's the other team has the ball. Notre Dame's offense versus Ohio State's defense. The Buckeyes' defense doesn't get enough credit because of how explosive their offense is. It ranks very well near the top of the line in the country. And Joe, Notre Dame's offense has had a really slow start 2 games in a row. They've used deferring the kickoff and scoring just before halftime. They scored in all 4 of those possessions against Georgia and Texas to get them off the mat. They absolutely cannot have that happen if they want to win this game.
No, Sean, and at the same time, to go the extreme of that, you can now fall down 2 scores to Ohio State. And it really has a lot to do with Ohio. It has a good amount to do with Ohio State's offense, but I say good amount being 30 to 40%. I think Ohio State's defense is not a defense that's going to allow big plays. They have it all year. Certainly, if you want to say the 2 jade and blue touchdowns for Texas were big plays, I just thought those were masterfully schemed up. And to be completely honest with you, Sean, that had to be at the back of Sarkisian's playbook. I think a lot of what they wanted to do early in that game was not working, which is why you saw Texas score their TDs in the second and fourth quarter. Normally, what's in the front half of that playbook clicks pretty well, and they had to go to the back of it for it to work. So that's my way of saying Ohio State's defense is not going to be a defense you're going to climb from a 14-point plus deficit against. So I think Riley Leonard's got to be really smart. I do think, like he's done the last 2 games, he's got to be really effective on the ground, or at least make Ohio State respect him on the ground, because Jeremiah Love, really don't know how healthy he is at this point. Jadarian Price was pretty ineffective against Penn State for the most part. This is a game where they're going to have to find another guy to do it, whether that's Mitch Evans, Gatehouse, whoever. They're going to need someone else to step up, because Ohio State, this is not unlike any offense they've faced. I think, in a way, Ohio State's battle-tested way better on defense than Notre Dame. I thought Notre Dame's defense in comparison to Ohio State's defense performed a lot worse against Penn State, albeit Penn State developed a lot since that November 2nd date. I really believe that Riley Leonard's going to have to make some plays he hasn't made all year for Notre Dame to win this game. And I think Mitch Evans is going to have to come up big. And one of these receivers, whether it's Gatehouse or maybe even it's Jeremiah Love or Jadarian Price in the passing game, something is going to have to be creative from Notre Dame.
I think with the 10 days of prep, or 9 days for the team that played second for Ohio State, I don't think we're going to see like the initial stuff work. I think it's going to come down to the third and fourth options for both teams. I think you can argue that Texas made Ohio State do that. I mean, Carnell Tate has not led them in receiving in many games this year. He's a great player, but he's their third option, maybe even fourth if you count G. Scott. So I think Ohio State's going to do a good job on the running backs. Both of them have struggled. I think, Riley Leonard on the ground is not like good. I don't know if he'll probably get his yards, but I'm not sure the explosive plays will be there from the quarterback. And then it comes to Faison, Greathouse. I mean, I do think you're probably going to have a good performance from everybody for Notre Dame. And I think Ohio State's going to be good enough to make them go to third and fourth options. And then on the flip side, the Ohio State third and fourth options are still really good players, probably would start on 95% of these Division I teams. So that's why I do think it'll be close early, but Ohio State just has too many weapons. That's why they beat Texas, and I think that's why they'll win here. But, Joe, there's a lot of ways Ohio State can win this. Let's paint a picture on how the Irish can pull off the upset.
I think first and foremost and most paramount to me is scoring first, and specifically the first TD. If Ohio State goes down the field opening drive, receives the ball, and kicks a field goal, I think anything short of a TD for Notre Dame's defense is a victory. It kind of gives Al Golden a chance to step back and really make adjustments, and that's something he did really well in the Penn State game, Sean. I know they gave up more points in the second half than they did in the first, but let's face it, Penn State got lucky on some of those calls. I'm not saying Penn State did not deserve to be in that game. They certainly did.
Penn State
But
were
Notre,
more aggressive and they were pushing it too in
yeah,
that second
but
half.
yeah, but Notre Dame too at the same time made proper adjustments, and unfortunately the penalties gave Penn State just one too many chances, and they scored, which made Notre Dame have to make that late play. Getting off that game because we have a whole nother video just specifically recapping it. I do believe Notre Dame has to be the aggressor, right? They have to do what Ohio State did in their first two playoff games. They have to come out, not necessarily with their hair on fire, because if you're a little too cowboy-y, I think Jim Knowles, who, let's face it, he licked his chops in the Big 12 with Oklahoma State, or maybe that's not a great phrase. He came up coordinating defenses in the Big 12 with Oklahoma State. And that means he faced the Baker Mayfields, the Kyler Murrays, the Sam Ellingers of the world. Those were teams that put up points. He knows how to take advantage of teams being greedy, and I don't think Notre Dame is. That's not their DNA, and it should not be their DNA in this game. What I mean by that is giving them a lot to think about, whether that's Riley Leonard scrambling. That means getting to second and short, third and short, getting to plays where you're not behind the sticks. Because let's face it, Sean, if it's third and obvious passing, Ohio State's pass rush is going to get after you, whether it's JTT, Jack Sawyer. I don't know the status of Cody Simon, 10 days out, but they have a lot of other horses. Sonny Styles. There are guys that will 1,000%, Tyleik Williams, that will 1,000% get after Riley Leonard. And in certain cases, the best play for him is going to be throwing it away and trusting that defense, kind of playing the field position battle. I thought Texas did a good job of playing. But winning first and second down, getting 4 to 5 yards on each of those is going to be really big for the Irish to sustain drives. And at worst, I'd say the goal of each drive doesn't even have to be score a TD. It means getting 2 first TDs, getting it to the middle of the field. Then from there, I think you open up a lot of options. You maybe take some more risks. And at worst, you give Ohio State the ball within your 10-yard line, which Notre Dame's done a pretty good job playing complementary football all year.
And Joe, this might be the first game where Notre Dame has an inferior roster to their opponent. I think Georgia, the argument can be made, and Riley Leonard has sort of played into that. We talked about for the previews of the semifinals that the quarterbacks on all 4 of the teams that were remaining were not the best player on their team, and they were designed that way, and sort of that they were still able to win a game without a great performance. I'm not sure that works here for Notre Dame. I think Riley Leonard probably has to play really well, and he has to take some risks. But again, you can't throw interceptions. You can't turn the ball over to this Ohio State team. So they're picking and choosing is going to be big for Marcus Freeman. There is a way that I think he just totally coaches circles around Ryan Day, especially if they go up early. I'm not sure we're going to see any trickery early on, but maybe in the third or fourth quarter when it becomes real desperation time for the team that's losing, we might see something that we haven't seen all year. The odds are certainly stacked against the Irish, but Joe, at least I think they will make this a game into the second half. I do think Ohio State will prove to be too much. I've got the Buckeyes 30, Fighting Irish 20.
I do think if Notre Dame scores first, and I'm not trying to do this for every time Ohio
No,
State
I think
plays.
they have a better than 50% chance to win if they go up 7-0.
I agree with you completely, Sean. And if Notre Dame gets an early lead, or they have a lead any point in the second half, that's exactly where Ohio State does not want to be. And a lot of people in the comments and certainly in our messages are going to criticize, well, you told Riley Leonard he can't be too conservative, but he can't be too risky either. That's the problem when you play Ohio State. Because of that offense and because of how good their defense is, it's going to be all about critical split-second decisions that will make or break the game. And Quinn Ewers, for the most part, made the better of those decisions. The one time he didn't wasn't his fault. It was his coach's fault on that second and goal.
Hey, we lose you, Joe? Yep, you're back.
Second.
You're back.
My point is, these split-second decisions are what makes or breaks it for Ohio State. So, I mean, for teams when they beat Ohio State. Now, you could look at the Michigan and Oregon game. One thing I'll tell you, the one similarity was they didn't make the critical mistakes toward the end of each half, the way Texas did and the way Penn State did when they lost. I think you look at all their close games this year, and including the two they lost. So I lost you 1 second, but
Yep, you're good now.
yeah, you really have to analyze why the
No, no.
hopefully most of you didn't lose me, but really what you have to analyze in each of Ohio State's close games is when was the wrong decision made and why were you even in that position? Because if Notre Dame's in a position where they don't have to make a crazy play in a tie game or when they're down a possession that could break the game open, that's where it's key. Because Ohio State, aside from one incident, which was in Columbus on November 30th, where they didn't take advantage of that Jack Sawyer pick at the goal line, each time they buried a team that made that critical mistake in the fourth quarter. So Notre Dame, I think the best way to win this game is to not even be in that position. But Sean, you gave your prediction. I'm going to give mine. I think Ohio State gets it done. I think they score first. I think Notre Dame keeps it competitive till about the third quarter. I think the fourth quarter, Ohio State breaks it open, wins the game by a score of 35-17. I do think Notre Dame puts up a pretty good fight, but ultimately Ohio State proves too much through through 4 quarters. They win the national title, meeting back to back for the Big Ten. And more importantly, for Ryan Day's sake, this is one thing I want to talk about, Sean. I think stakes for this game, you have to feel house money's on Notre Dame's side.
For
I think
sure.
no one really expects them to win. Ohio State, talking to a lot of people I know in Columbus, talking to a lot of people in the Ohio State fan base, it will be a failure of a year, in spite of beating Texas, in spite of winning the Rose Bowl, because of the cushions they didn't lay themselves. They didn't beat Michigan, they didn't win the Big Ten. This is a game Ohio State has to feel a lot of pressure in. That doesn't mean they're going to clam up and not play loose necessarily the way they have the last 3 games, but it does mean that they don't have the house money in this. They certainly feel they're the favorite. ESPN, the way they've talked, everyone knows they're the favorite. What favorites got to do is they have to bury their competition when the opportunity is provided. And I think Ryan Day's really flipped the narrative around on himself nationally. I do think Columbus, which is one of the harshest fan bases you could find, has proven they will not be so forgiving if they do lose this game. I think a lot of people are only considering the possibility they win. Certainly me and Sean are. But if Sean's bracket is canon like it's been so far, uh, we're in a different universe should Ohio State lose this game. So I do think the greater storyline of college football is more intriguing should Ohio State lose. But at the same time, I think it's just as intriguing to see how Ohio State fans treat Ryan Day. Although 1-4, a national championship winning head coach, one of the few who will be active when he does come back to Columbus next year.
And Joe, there, Ryan Day, one of his favorite sayings is to leave no doubt. Last game was the first time that they didn't leave no doubt and they still won the game. So potentially that if things are going Notre Dame's way and it is a one-score game late, maybe Ohio State just has enough to get across the line. I'm going to be rooting for Notre Dame for my bracket reasons, but Joe, there's a really good chance that our Big Ten has another championship. Now, Michigan has a lot of connections to both of these teams. Is Michigan pulling for Notre Dame here? Or does that make your win against Ohio State even more impressive if they win the Natty?
Um, I think, to be honest with you, most Michigan fans will be pulling for Notre Dame, but as you've seen from a lot of meme accounts, this is kind of the nightmare situation. The Hitler Stalin memes, the Mao Stalin whatever memes that come up are certainly going to be in use a lot in the next 10 days. One thing I'll say is, uh, in terms of a Big Ten crowd, I think this would solidify the Big Ten is has been far superior to the SEC since Georgia won that title against TCU in 2022. And then in terms of Notre Dame, right? They haven't won a national title since Ronald Reagan was in office. That's one thing. Modern success in the postseason for Notre Dame has been really rare. In fact, until they had beaten Indiana, they hadn't won a BCS or New Year's Six bowl game, including CFP games too. So to completely flip the script of that in one season. Marcus Freeman, a lot of people after that Marshall loss, especially after that Ohio State loss where they only had 10 guys on the field. These are two coaches that are on the verge of completely flipping the narrative nationally on both of them. I think should Freeman, even if they lose this game by 40, I don't think a lot of people are going to question Notre Dame's progress as a program since he took over. Ryan Day certainly has the most to lose in this, and I do think that, kind of being the favorite has its advantages, right? I think Notre Dame might. I don't think they're necessarily scared, but they could feel the wrath of them if they mess up early. On the flip side, though, Ohio State will be a lot more uncomfortable trailing in this than Notre Dame will, if that makes sense.
Yep. And Joe, that is all we have for them today. The National Championship game preview. We hope that you liked our previews and recaps for the college football playoff. Depending on how they do, we might do them for basketball. We'll certainly bring them back next year for football as there's more time in between the games. But Joe, unless you got anything else to add, we're going to wrap this one up.
No, I tell everyone to enjoy the game, and for Sean's bracket's sake, let's hope Notre Dame pulls it out.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys a couple of days after this game goes final. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.